Thank you for attending the webinar today. MDS and SSIS Better Together for Controlling ETL Frameworks, presented by Stephen Bailey and Max Brackett. I am Max, and Stephen will be the presenter and giving the demo. And can you go ahead and move to the next slide? Go ahead and move to the next slide. All right, and we are Agile Bay. Our lead architect and founders, Jose Chinchilla. If you're part of SQL Pass or the various user groups in the area, you've probably been to one of his classes or heard him talk. And he is the president of Agile Bay, and he's been in doing data warehousing for quite some time now. And there's his contact information. Go ahead and keep. He's also co-authored 3 SQL books. And next. And our presenter today is Stephen Bailey. He's a Microsoft certified professional. He's 20 years of development experience. His LinkedIn information is up there if you want to get that and connect with him on LinkedIn. His specialties are ETL, data warehousing, automation, OLAP, and OLTP databases. Stephen, would you like to go ahead and take it from here?
Sure. Thanks everyone for attending. Today we're going to talk about MDS and SSIS Better Together. So first, we're going to talk about some typical MDS use cases using MDS control ETLs, and then we'll be going over a demo to illustrate what we're talking about. And finally, we'll have some Q&A. So first, let's talk about some typical MDS use cases. Now, MDS, of course, stands for Master Data Services. And when we're talking about master data, we're talking about the data that's relevant across the entire enterprise. And MDS is a database that's useful for storing this sort of information. And some of the common uses might be, just as an example, a common list of clients that are used across the enterprise, a common list of distributors, basically any data that should be maintained centrally or accessed globally, because you don't want to have a lot of duplication across the enterprise. But some other uses we're going to talk about today have to do with configurations, control, and metadata. So we're going to talk about using MDS to control ETLs. Now, a lot of developers like to use different methods for control, for configuration for ETLs. XML files, some might maintain a SQL database that they are basically manually updating, developer. And of course, you can use environment variables, which with the later releases of SQL Server is very convenient. And all of these are relevant and have their place. However, we have some added benefits of using MDS because it does allow that central access, and because it has a user interface that's pretty simple to use. So you don't have a developer having to maintain this control data all the time. It could be maintained by just a user. All right, so at this point, we're going to show some something a little more concrete. I'm going to bring up SQL Management Studio here, and first thing for this demo is I'll show you what databases we're going to be using. So we have here, most people are probably familiar with VentureWorks, which is sort of the testing and development stock database. So we have, in this case, 4 copies of AdventureWorks, Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, and these are simulate something that might actually happen in the real world, is that you could have these distributed databases that are large and devoted to particular sales territories, for instance. But all of these could end up being the source of data for, say, a data warehouse that you're populating. Now, in our example here, each one of these databases I've added a view here called the salesperson territory. And if what I'm going to do is query that database and show you what is contained. So in this instance, because this is AdventureWorks Northeast, we are only showing the Northeast territory. And the way we're accomplishing that is by something in the where clause here. And we're doing the same thing in each of these other databases. So Northwest, we've got the same view, but we are restricting it simply to the Northwest territory. And the reason that we're doing that is for our example here, and we'll see what's going to happen with that shortly. The other thing we have here is, you'll notice the MDS database. Now, there's a series of views that are set up in MDS, but one in particular that's going to come into play for us, and we'll see where this comes from shortly, is this ETL source config. And I'm just going to show the contents of it here. It's just that it's got a series of what we're calling load groups, load group 1 and 2, and we've got some corresponding databases. So we're saying load group 1 contains AdventureWorks Northeast and AdventureWorks Northwest. All right. Now, how we set this up is that we actually go into MDS, and there's 2 ways of interfacing here. One is directly through the MDS web interface, and I go into the Explorer. And in this case, we're looking at the database entities, which is nothing but the standard enumeration of the databases we have. We've got some. We're going to look at the main file here, though, or the main table. And you can see that we've got our load groups assigned to databases. We're going to come back and add a load group here, but first we'll be demonstrating exactly what we accomplish here. So imagine a situation where, say, one of these databases is really large, and you want to load it alone, and say you want to load maybe the 2 smaller databases in parallel or together. So, for instance, if Southeast were a really large database, we would give it its own load group. So let's show what we're talking about here. So when this is put into practice, we use a job, and I've got a series of jobs set up here for load group 1, 2, and there's also a 3, which will come along later. But what we do is we're currently passing a parameter in configuration. We're saying load group 1, and in this one we have a parameter for load group 2, and we can change this, of course, by going in here. So I'm going to show you the contents, the current contents of our destination table. So if I execute this query, you'll see that there is nothing in this table currently. Now, we said we noticed previously that load group 1 contains 2 databases, Northeast and Northwest. So if I go back to Management Studio, what I want to accomplish by running load group 1 is to have those two territory data show up in this table from
Can
both
you,
those two separate things.
Stephen, can you hang just a second? If anyone else is having difficulty hearing the audio from the web, will you please hit the little raise hand button on the controller? Because we've got to report that some of the audio is cutting, but they are on, they're getting the audio from the web, and I guess it's running fine for me. I'm dialed in, so if you're on the web and you're having issues, maybe try the dial-in. I'm not getting any other hands up with that are saying that they're cutting out. All right, sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
Go
no
ahead,
problem.
Stephen.
Here's the dial-in if anybody needs it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this job for load group 1, and the job starts, and it runs, and it tells us it succeeded. So I'm going to rerun this query, and what I'm hoping to see are data from both databases that are in load group 1. And that's exactly what we see. You see these 3 from Northwest, or excuse me, yes, 3 from Northwest and 1 from Northeast, and they all belong to load group 1. And if I wanted to load content of load group 2, which is the Southeast region, start job, it's in progress, run it again, and now we've added load group 2, which is the Southeast region. We could also, I'm going to truncate this table and run these again. We could run these at once or in parallel. So I kick off 1, I kick off 2. That one's completed. So now I run this query again, and all of the load groups have come in. So the question then is how we've accomplished that. And I'm going to bring up Visual Studio, and here's the ETL that we just ran. And well, you'll notice we have a parameter here for the load group, and we have a source and a destination, and we have the connections defined here. You'll notice that the AdventureWorks localhost, this source here, is actually uses an expression, and that expression, let's go to properties here, drag this up a little bit so you can see it better. If we look at expressions, we'll see that the initial catalog, the database name, is being determined by a variable here. And what happens is we'll show you how that variable gets populated. There's one other variable that you should know about when we do this, and that is the DB list. So we've got the DB list, which is an object type, and DB name, which is just a string. So here is a component with a SQL query. This gets us our list of databases that belong to the particular group. I'm going to open that up and show you the SQL. You notice here is a question mark, and that represents the parameter that it's being passed. And incidentally, that is set up here in parameter mapping. You'll see it's the same parameter we're passing to this package. So what happens to this query when it's passed something like a 1 or a 2 for the load group? What happens, I'm going to bring up Management Studio again here. is this query, only here where instead of a question mark, you actually see the load group being specified. So when we run this query, what happens is it returns the two databases that belong to load group 1. If I change it to 2, execute, we get Southeast, which belongs to load group 2. You'll notice that the source of this query is looking at is our view in MDS. So the contents of that view are going to reflect the data that we've updated through the interface. And we'll get back to the interface shortly. So when this runs, it generates a list, and it's actually loading that list into our object here. Now what happens next is we've got a for each loop container. I'm just going to go into here and double clicking, and what you see here is for the collection, we specified a for each ADO enumerator, and right here we've specified our object, our DB list, and under variable mappings, and remembering that this list contains nothing but the list of databases, we've specified the DB name, which is the string that's going to hold the name of the database in each iteration of the loop, and that's going to be used to dynamically determine the connection string. So for each iteration, this is going to loop once for each database in the list. We're going to use this control, this data flow task. In each instance, it's going to pull from the source, same table, but the database is going to vary depending on what's being passed to this connection. Each time, we're adding a derived column here. Just tell what the load group is, and again, it's just using that parameter. We're loading it into our destination table here. Here are the mappings. So these are all coming from that source table, and we've just added one more column that tells us which load group it is. And I can run this now. So if I truncate our destination, try not to hit the wrong button, and we see that the table is empty again. And then I specify here load group 2, and I just run this. It's going to happen pretty fast, but you may notice it loops twice. Probably not. I didn't even see it happen. It went so fast, but it's going to loop for each count, each database that we passed. Actually, you load group 2. That's why I only loop once. So let's change this to load group 1. That's the one with 2 databases. Hopefully, we'll catch it in the act. You can see that. So once, twice. It was fast, but you could maybe see it. So now I'm going to bring up Management Studio again, and I run the query. And you can see that it's loaded. So that's how we set up the ETL. So let's suppose we want to add another load group. Now there's 2 ways of interfacing, or at least 2 ways of interfacing with MDS. Now one is this web interface that we saw here. Say if I want to add a member, I could click here and it will add, and and each one of these can be edited over here on the side. Now you see we have 2 other entities that we've created, one for load groups and one for databases, and this allows us to, by maintaining that list separately, we can choose which one we want rather than having to type it in freehand and risk making a mistake. So there's another way of interfacing with MDS, and that is to use Excel. Now there's a Excel add-in you can download that allows this, and what you do is you connect here, like so. I'll just bring up a fresh sheet. Over here, I select my model here in the version. And ETL source config is the entity we want to edit. We'll bring that up. Expand that a little. So hopefully a little more readable. So let's suppose I want to add a third load group, and I want to put a different a database in it or assign it. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to do one for Southwest. And this is arbitrary here, but I'm just using it to give it a name. Southwest load group 3. And now you'll see that this has become highlighted, and I have a drop down here. And I'm going to choose load group 3. I can edit the load group entity the same way, by the way, and add as many load groups as I want to. Same goes for databases. So I'm going to assign this to Southwest. And I'm going to hit publish, and I'm going to skip any annotations, and now it's updated. So I'm going to go to SQL Server again and query the view, and we should see, I'm going to query all the load groups here. We should, oops. It would help if I highlight the correct part. We should see, only getting databases here. Let's look at the, if I refresh this, you should see them show up here. All right, so there's load group 4. And further, the ID is 4, so I should be able to specify that here and get something. If it's code. My apologies. 9. Oh, here we go. There's the new load group, number 3. Okay, so now we should be able to use this load group 3 now. Query this. So load group 3 has been added to the already existing records. Okay, and so one final thing, just to show all these can run parallel. I'm going to truncate one more time. Table is empty. I should be able to just kick off all these. Without any interference. So success, success. And all our load groups should be represented here. They are. All right, that concludes the main portion of the presentation, and we can go on to the Q&A now, I believe. So I will bring this up, and think Max, that you were taking any questions?
Yes. What are some of the problems that you've encountered in doing this in the past?
As far as
what are the typical
implementing
things to look out for?
Well,
Like,
main,
what are
main
some
thing,
of the things? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right.
There's a pause.
Yeah, so one thing is to make sure to create your view. So when you're in Master Data Services, it doesn't automatically expose this view for you like we have here. You actually have to go in, and the way you do that is in the Integration Management section. So you go in here, and there's a Create Views section. You can see we already have created a view for the ETL source config, but we can create a new one for one of the other entities. So I select my model. I select the entity. In this case, we'll do the load groups. For the version, I just default it to version 1. Format is going to be leaf members. And I'm going to load groups like so. And it helps to know how to type. And I'm just going to save that. So now, if we go here in Management Studio, I'm going to go up to the MDS database and refresh the views, and we should see that we now have the load groups added. In addition to our ETL source config, we now have the load groups, and we can query it, and we have all the information here. I could easily go in and add a load group, number 4, for instance, by going to
we also have, while you're doing that, we also have another question. Could you use connection strings instead?
You absolutely can. It would work very similar to what we've seen here, except when you're in Visual Studio, right here in the connection managers, let me get that where I can see it again. There we go. So you'll see right now the property that's in the expressions is just the DB name, because all these in the example are on the same server. But if you're using multiple servers, you can do something very similar here. Instead of using the initial catalog, what you'll do is go in and specify for the expression. You'll select the property, and you'll find connection string, and that's where you'll assign your. You can either pass the entire connection string as a parameter and just specify it here the way we did with the DB name, or you can use a variable and concatenate together the different parts of the connection string. In either way, you would put it here, and the expression would become the connection string. When you're running it dynamically.
And can you parallelize with the in the same package?
Yes, you can within the same package. It's a little more complicated at that point. What I would do is basically use a master package and call the sub package, which would be like this one. Call it more than once from the master package, so that both instances are running at the same time, but using a different set of parameters. So you could go that route as well. Yeah, to the use of a master package. That could be useful as well. There's several ways you could do that. But inside the master package, you would want to get your list of the servers and distribute those to the child packages. And there's a few different methods you could use to do that.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions.
All right.
All right, can you go ahead and put up the contact information screen?
Certainly. So here's our contact, and oops. Eventually, here we are. So yeah, we are Agile Bay. This is the website address. I am Stephen Bailey, and here's my email. Max, our presenter.
Oh, we do have one more question. Why MDS
Okay.
and not a table?
Well, in essence, MDS is a table or a set of tables. You know, it's a view. The difference is if you're using just a table, then somebody has to, interact with that table. Now, if it's a developer, we have no problem with that. We can go into the table. We have the proper permissions, and we could just put whatever elements we want in there. But let's suppose it's something a developer has neither the time nor the real, interest in or the knowledge of maintaining. For instance, a list of sales reps. Let's suppose that these different sales reps are, associated with different territories. Maybe you add new territories. Maybe it's a list of territories, but it's something that a business person would be cognizant of, not necessarily something a developer would be cognizant of. And a business user is going to have a lot easier time with MDS, either through the web interface or through the Excel add-in interface, which can be initially set up by the developer for ease of use, and then have the business user use it ongoing. But either way, it makes it easy for a business user to put in relevant information in a timely manner without having to bother the developer about it. And it also means you don't have to write a fresh piece of software interface just to interface with your table, because it's already handled by MDS. It's flexible enough. I hope that answers your question.
That looks like it did. All right. I guess since we have no other questions, we'll go ahead and conclude the meeting. Thank you again for attending, and we hope you have a great day.
Yep, thank you. If you do think of other questions, please send either of us an email, and thank you very much.